It's now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
Welcome to this month's Learning Now TV. I'm sorry I'm a bit dark. I'm actually in the US and the lighting leaves a little bit to be desired. So I'll look at you through the gloom while Kate, as always, is beautifully illuminated. Kate, what is on the program this month?
Welcome along, guys. I always think of September as sort of being start of a new term, everybody going into October, everybody sort of got their pencil cases in order, and we're kind of set. So among us this week we've got a friend of the show, David James, discussing the conclusions of his company's latest research called The State of Learning in the Flow of Work. Very fitting for Mr. James. Again, Armitage and Anna Barrett from Mind Tools for Business talk about some of the major findings of the latest learning performance benchmark study, so always one to look out for that. And then Vincent Bellevaux and Mike Bollinger from Cornerstone, two gentlemen I've had the pleasure of knowing for a long time during my career, highlight some findings in their latest skills survey research. It's really, really interesting, so do check that one out. I think that skills is one of those things that everybody's been talking so much about, but nobody really has the keys to the code or the playbook, but they've been looking at what high performing organizations are doing. So fascinating stuff.
All good. Yes, I enjoy the show. I've got some original, interesting research to share with you this month. It's a pleasure to be speaking once more to David James. I used to call David the CLO of Loop with 3 O's, but Loop has not disappeared, but it's been absorbed into 360 Learning, which is a French software company. And David and we are wearing the uniform of learning. So we expect pretty much everybody to be dressed like this within 6 months, maybe, but we're pioneering it today. And why I'm talking to David is that 360 Learning has just completed a survey, and I'm giving you advanced notice of the results of the survey. Nearly 2,000 L&D staff from across the US, UK, France, and Germany, with some, I think, fascinating results. So David, first of all, tell me the context. Why did 360 Learning do this, and what are the headlines that we should pay attention to?
Well, thanks, Nigel. So the idea behind this is that that for a long time, Nigel, it's going to come as no surprise, I felt there's been a mismatch between what employees want from learning and development and the way that both it's invested in and the activities that it leads on. And so you're right, we did survey 2,000 people, but only half of those were learning and development, and the other half were just normal people, employees. But we wanted to find out from them what it was that they wanted from learning and development. Why engage at all? What has been effective for them? So we're not talking about preferences or hypothetically what they would like or their preferred methods of learning, and how effective this has all been in the context of their career, so that we can fully understand what their perspective is. And the reason is, Nigel, is that I felt that when we do ask around preferences, we seem to feed the L&D beast and maintain the status quo. You ask people what they prefer, they tell you they prefer classes. How would you like to be engaged? Well, we'd like it to be fun. And keeping it hypothetical doesn't mean that we remain effective. And I've been in learning and development now for nigh on 25 years, and I don't feel as if we've made the advances. So the survey was all about how do we truly amplify what employees are trying to do, and then try to move learning and development closer. So you asked for headlines. So if I go with the US and the UK headlines, overwhelmingly, respondents said that they pursue learning at work simply to do their jobs better. Now, that's going to be no surprise. This is 3/4 of respondents, and of course they do. Some of them want to feel better at work. I mean, we're talking like the second cited driver for engaging with continuous learning. So was continuous learning, sorry, it's 66%. And it's so that they were motivated and felt confident at work. Now, the consensus is that L&D programs are most useful when they empower employees to tackle real challenges that they actually face within their jobs. And there's also an intolerance for irrelevant learning, or if we say generic learning, which I think is really interesting because it challenges the assumption that our people either don't know how to learn or they've reduced concentration spans. Where I think this backs up what many surveys have said, is that with such an abundance of information available to us, we are really, we've got to big up human beings. We are intolerant for things that we don't recognize the value of, and you've got to say, Nigel, with some of the silver bullet solutions that are made available to L&D, vast suites of generic learning being one, the people that have been hired as potentially the smartest, the most appropriate candidates for any given roles in our organizations have been telling us overwhelmingly with their feet and their attention spans that your generic content doesn't cut it. And I think that is hugely insightful.
Very insightful. Can I just sum up, just to make sure I understand what you're saying? A number of things you're saying. The first one is that if you ask the right questions, if you ask what helps you do your work, what makes you better at your job, the one thing that doesn't help is generic context-free learning. That annoys people rather than simply they're simply neutral about. And the second thing you're saying is that the vast majority of people who use learning at work want to do it to solve problems at work, want to do their job better, and therefore they want learning essentially in the flow of work. When they have a problem, when they have a challenge, they want to be able to reach out and solve that problem, meet that challenge. Is that a fair summary?
It is a fair summary, Nigel. I think that we've been all involved in a live experiment since we've had Google and YouTube on our desktops at work, and overwhelmingly, when we find ourselves within a situation where we need guidance or support, we will seek that. And I think that having that at our fingertips has changed both our expectations and our abilities to perform. But what neither of those provide, Google or YouTube, is any context that emanates from the question, how do I do the right things here? Which there is still an expectation that people will. That's what people need in the context of their work.
It's like there's a magic flip that you can go from a 5-minute video on YouTube saying, oh no, I can interpret that. And if I did this and did that, well, that could somewhat help me in my job. People don't like that. And there's a very interesting statistic, which I noted from the summary of the report, which is that traditional online learning, virtual workshops, MOOCs, e-learning is only considered to be effective by 38% of respondents. So the vast majority do not find it very effective to look at that generic content. And that is a very large wastage if that is where you put 100% of your effort, which some L&D departments do, that they see it as all about bringing whatever content, wherever they can find it, into the desktop in front of staff, and staff are pushing back and saying, I've got better things to do in my time.
Yeah, that's right.
True, isn't it?
Yeah. So and you've stated there the US response that 38% thought that online learning, such as e-learning, virtual workshops, and MOOCs were effective, but that drops down to 29% in the UK. whereas this is hypothetical and it's not about preference. This is people saying what they actually deem has been the most effective. Learning from peers, both in the US and the UK, was deemed the most effective method of learning in the context of their work. But you picked up another really interesting point there, Nigel, that time was considered one of the major factors or barriers of people. But learners had stated a clear preference that they wanted learning woven into the work itself, rather than blocking out any time, because they didn't feel as if they had time to block out. So you mentioned earlier about learning in the flow of work. It's not just a buzzword within learning and development. It's a way of describing what our people in organizations expect from us, because the more we close the gap between the challenge experienced and the solution, the more able we are then to affect what actually happens next. Where I think too much of learning and development tries to flip that and says, how close can we get the challenge to after the learning experience? And I think that then we operate within the realm of days, weeks, months, and so on. If you flip that round to, if you understand the challenge people face when they encounter unfamiliar situations and challenges, which in the main is during periods of transition and enforced adaptation, then you can be there at the moment of need, to quote Goffreson and Moshe, to influence the moment of apply.
Yes, I think that's absolutely right. And we're talking maybe minutes rather than days, weeks, months. That's what people want. And that is the way to increase not just efficiency, but effectiveness as well.
Yeah.
So that if people feel that they're progressing in their work, they're able to do good work, they will love all the support and help you can give them. If the learning is a barrier to doing good work, in other words, it distracts them from, takes them outside, or is not effective, they're beginning increasingly to get impatient and pushing back. So all the technology in the world you can stick on their desktop, but if what is provided is not at the moment of need, is not relevant, and is context-free, you won't get any kind of success. This is very strong. I think that the conclusions are not kind of maybe, maybe not. They're very definitive coming out of this. And you've got enough people, enough responders to be able to draw some pretty definitive conclusions. So I think this is very useful research. Question for you: how do I see it? When will it be published? How will I get hold of it?
So it'll be published on the 8th of September and available on the 360 Learning website. Excellent.
And we'll put a crawl on the screen for anyone who wants to download it and read it. I think they should. There's lots of good stuff. Not only should they read it, but they should have a discussion in the L&D team about what is this telling us and how should we maybe do things a little bit differently. And maybe we should confirm the findings by talking to our employees, not just talk amongst the L&D staff. So this is all about optimizing work, not optimizing learning. And that's the essence of it. Absolutely. So David James, CLO of 360 Learning, what a great discussion. I'm really pleased to see this research, and I hope it prospers, flourishes all over the world, and people take note and things start to move. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Nigel.
Growing your people can get pretty messy, but degreed learning experience makes it neat by giving your workforce the flexibility to learn when, where, and how they want, and giving you the power to guide their growth so you can solve today's challenges while building the skills to take on tomorrow.
Next up, Bob Moshe. We're thrilled to have him continuing his series on elevating performance. This is the 5th of 6 parts. This is going to be one of those series that we're going to hark back to and get people to watch in its entirety. I know many people who haven't started the new Game of Thrones yet because they want to binge watch it. So if you haven't started yet, I very much recommend watching them all through in one go. This month, he's talking about the essential performance support tools.
Greetings, friends, and welcome back to episode 5 of the Elevating Performance series. Bob Mosher here. It's so great to have you back. I do hope these are being helpful. By all means, please reach out, email, let me know. And if you have any questions, by all means, I will do my very best to answer. Today, as promised in our last episode, we're going to go a bit deeper and be very finite about the tools of the trade. It amazes me, friends, that you don't hesitate to buy an effective e-learning authoring system, let's say, or an LMS to host that. LXPs, all the rage right now, right? We don't hesitate to buy a good hosting tool for our virtual domains and for our classrooms, which we've had to go to in many cases because of the pandemic. But when it comes to this discipline, one of the most powerful I have ever seen in my professional life, that actually brings us to the point of performance with our learners like L&D has wanted to be since I've been involved, and to give you ROI metrics like you've never seen before, we shy away from defending, fighting for, and investing in the tool that will make it happen. Friends, if you're going to do this well, all the things we talked about in the prior episodes are true, but in the end, if you can't deliver a deliverable, it's not going to work. And the tools that live at the point of apply, particularly in the world we live in today, are what are called digital coaches, or in the old days, EPSS. This wonderful woman, Gloria Geary, 1991, wrote a remarkable book, which you really should read, called Electronic Performance Support Systems, or what we now call an EPSS. The reality is that has matured even beyond that domain because of two major problems. They are very expensive, and they are only for IT, into what is a remarkable array of tools that you can find in the vendor space. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. But friends, here's my point. Be prepared to invest, or I guarantee you, your solutions and your efforts in this domain will fall short, and in most cases, the opportunity to do it at all will often be denied. And that's so unfortunate because of all the power we've talked about. There is nothing, friends, nothing in our world like workflow learning, 5 moments of need, performance support, digital coaches, in the 40 years that I have done this, that does what I think L&D wants to do, which is directly and measurably impact performance. So a couple things. When you buy a tool, you have to have a design. The vendors will tell you, without effective design, friends, their tools don't work. When I was back in my Microsoft days, one of my favorite quotes during a meeting I sat through from those in the product group, someone in the Microsoft Word group said, look, just because we gave them Word doesn't mean they became writers. Well, just because you have any kind of tool to design digital coaches or EPSSs, if you don't have design and an architecture around it, a framework, they won't work. So here's the framework we often use, friends, with this. It's something called the performance support pyramid. And what it basically means in concept is that this is a minimalist design model, which is very inverted for us because in training, which we often think about, we put a lot in there. And we should put, well, probably not as much as we do, but we should put a good amount of information there because we are schooling people up. And it's really a knowledge-centric approach. So a lot of stuff makes sense. Friends, when you're performing, it is a doing time. They want to get back to work. They want as little as possible. The performer wants as little as possible so they can get back to work. So when you design these tools, you design from very minimal first and only give them that, even though the tool might let you give them more, only give them that. And if they ask for it, you give them more after that. So steps, job aid like, supporting knowledge, what do those mean? Broader understanding. References, click out to SOPs, PDFs, all kinds of wonderful things. E-learning, these tools can link out to that if I need to take a class or sit through an e-learning course, or even a mentor coach, Teams, all these chat environments. But notice there was an evolution to that journey. In too many designs we see, we put everything there. A link to everything will not work. Too much. This is a minimalist model, and these tools will not work unless you design them that way. Let's talk quickly about the tools. Friends, there's an array here from what you've already got to what you can buy. Like anything. In the early days, I remember trying to do e-learning with PowerPoint. And frankly, to a degree I could, but it wasn't great. So guess what? We eventually matured that industry into buying very expensive, but wonderfully elaborate and sophisticated tools. Same here. There is a linked PDF that will work. SharePoint can even work. We've used those. But there are also an array of vendors who have terrific stuff. Look into them and buy as high up that scale as you can for the functionality you need. If you're going to do performance support and raise the performance, you have to invest in technology and deliverables that allow it. You can't do it without a digital coach, friends. You just can't. Hopefully this has been helpful. Looking forward to episode 6, where we'll come back and talk about how to put a bow around all this and revisit key points to why this is absolutely where L&D needs to go to be where we need to be in the world we live in to support the learners the way we should. Be well, be safe. Talk soon. See you next time.
Upskill and inform your learners with Mind Tools for Business. Empower your people to thrive at work and help them step up and meet everyday workplace challenges with confidence. Our toolkit provides unlimited access to thousands of quality assured resources, all in one place. It's easy to use and on demand, anytime, anywhere. Experience stress-free onboarding with dedicated client partner support. And get access to our library of industry insight and expert analysis. Perform, manage, lead with Mind Tools for Business. Visit mindtoolsbusiness.com to find out more.
It's a pleasure, and I can't believe a year has gone past. It's a pleasure to talk to Gent Armatai, who is the head of research, and Emma Barnett, who is a researcher at Mind Tools. And we're talking about, you'll not be surprised, the most important piece of research that Mind Tools produce every year, which is the annual L&D benchmark. And just adding it up, this is the 18th edition. So there's a longitudinal study, almost a unique longitudinal study that I hope someone will do some research on in itself, because I'm looking back from the beginning will be a very, very interesting synopsis of the way L&D has evolved or has not evolved, as the case may be. But this report is particularly interesting to me. It's called, Is Learning Culture Keeping Pace with Rapid Digitization? And I think that's a really fascinating and interesting subject. But first of all, just talk to us, Gent, a little bit about what the annual benchmark is and what it tries to do every year.
Thanks for having us again, Nigel. And yes, a year has passed. It's unbelievable. I think the starting point of it is the ultimate aim of our research, which is a multi-level understanding of organizational learning and how that impacts the business. You know, what has positive impact on the business, the things that they care about. And that led us to collecting data from learning and development leaders for now almost 18, 19 years, since 2004. As a result of that data collection, we produce this report, which is an annual report every single year. And our focus differs every year, but the core, the foundation of it is always the same, which is what is having positive business impact that learning and development leaders are doing during this time. What has changed, what hasn't changed, and where do things stand as a result. We continuously try to improve it. This year, for example, we are thinking about introducing environmental variables, so external variables that are beyond just the organization that impact, and they came out of a number of articles that we looked into that gave us a highlight to say COVID, for example, is an external shock. It's not something that the organization can do itself. So yeah, that's just one of the things that we are trying to do.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And I'll turn to Emma. Emma, you were the principal author of the report, and you know it most intimately, I think, certainly of the three of us. So tell me about the themes. What major themes emerge? Because you're data driven. This isn't you deciding on the themes and then looking for examples. It's you looking at the data and seeing what the data tells you. So what kind of things did the data appear to be pointing towards this year, different from other years?
I think, well, you introduced the titleization issue, and not surviving, I suppose, without cultural innovation. And I think this year in particular, that's kind of the key message, I suppose. What we've seen, I guess, time and time again, is that technology, of course, is important, but over the last sort of few years that we've had, it's no surprise digitalization is, of course, sped up. But the problem we're seeing is that organizations are focusing so much on sort of going digital that they're almost neglecting the people that are going to be using those technologies. So they have the skills in place, but not necessarily sort of the attitudes, they have the tools in place, but not the attitudes and the skills that they need in order to sort of ensure that digital learning can survive, I guess. This emerged as sort of the red thread that sort of sung through the whole report, and it was kind of found in all aspects of the data, like you say, that we looked at. But we do focus on a few different key angles and how this issue is related to things like future-proofing as an organisation, attracting, developing and retaining top talent, and also to do learning solutions. So looking at what are people using today and how is that changing over time. As you say, we've been collecting this data for such a long time that we get to look at lots of longitudinal trends, which is always fascinating.
It is. I think that's very, very interesting. And that's one of the things that keeps me coming back for more, because you get a sense of the market and the environment moving forward or being stagnant. And I think both of those things are quite interesting. It's not all about rapid change. It's about some things changing very, very fast and other things not, or maybe not changing fast enough. The one thing I wanted to draw your attention to is that quote from one of the sections, which is rapid digitization cannot survive without cultural innovation. And I love that cannot survive. You're really making a big point there. So explain to me, what do you actually mean by that? And what led you to be so definitive? That's a big statement.
It is. It's a very big statement. Like I say, the data is where we look first for everything. And of course, it just so happens that ties into all the discussions that we're seeing and being part of in the wider context as well. But there's a graph in the report. I think it might be figure 10. And here we look at how things have changed over time in terms of attitudes towards learning, employee attitudes specifically. And what we saw sort of initially in 2021 was that attitudes generally increased. And this corresponded, of course, with a surge in digital technologies. Unfortunately, though, in 2022, this year, we've seen a real fall in these attitudes, and actually lower today than they were pre-pandemic. And so short-term gains weren't sustained and aren't sustained just by introducing technologies. I think that's kind of the key message. There has to be something else. You can't just roll out technologies and assume that that's going to fix all the cultural issues that perhaps exist in organisations. And so that is why I think we feel we can make such a bold claim. And of course, when we compare how sort of more top performing organisations in terms of those that are the most mature as learning organisations are performing in comparison to other organisations, those top performers tend to be the ones that are focusing more on people in all ways. So again, it seems that they are doing something that's more people focused, culture focused, that other organisations aren't, and for that reason they're performing much better.
Yes, that's really interesting. And you're right. If you look at your Fig 10, which is on page 13 of the report, what it shows is not just a small decline, but a plummeting of interest in employee engagement, employee attitude, appeal of digital tools, and increased self-determined learning as well. So all of those things that we've been pointing towards as critical for your learning as transformation in organizations, you're showing a marked decline. And clearly that's towards disengagement. It's tools without people, and tools without people is never going to work.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting though is when we reproduced our learning intelligence report earlier this year, we of course asked employees, how do you feel about digital technologies? And generally attitudes were pretty good. They're sort of saying that they understand the future of digital, and we find other literature that confirms this, that we actually include in the report. And they seem to be less afraid, I suppose, of digital technologies today than they were a couple of years ago. So these are almost contradictory a little bit, in the sense that employees themselves are saying they're happier with digital tools, but organisations are finding that there's a decline, I suppose, in attitudes. And so one of the things we're going to do this year is kind of understand that sort of disconnect, why there is this gap between what L&D leaders think is happening and what employees think is happening, and how we can kind of close the gap, I suppose, as well.
If you remember, Nigel, as well, last year's report, we almost predicted that something like this would happen. We said that with this rapid digitalization, there's going to be a cultural lag. as a result, because of the fast-paced movement, a lot of investment, a lot to do with the fact that there was no other choice. The gains that we saw last year were primarily driven, we argue, by a really kind of core vision of the organization, all moving in the same direction. There was all departments were kind of very clear on what their ambitions were, i.e. moving from office to remote. That was the goal for a lot of organizations in the same direction: IT, finance, data, everything working together. Whereas this year, there is this huge ambiguity in an array of choices for learning and development leaders. What is the best approach now in this kind of environment where you don't have kind of a one force in working from the office only? You now have a very distributed workforce on top of the other complexities that you have to deal with. How do you approach that? And because of that, we feel that a lot of these achievements have gone down because L&D itself are unclear about the direction and the future of their department.
It's not just increased technology tools, it's the nature of the workforce is changing. It's not just where individuals happen to be based, it's who is a member of the workforce. Are you a contractor? Are you part-time, full-time? Have you been in the organization and left and come back? To complexity, which it would appear from the report suggests that L&D is not keeping up with those sweeping changes. So Anna, if you were an L&D leader, what would you do? What would your take from this report be, and how would you take action? What would you recommend?
I think, well, one of the things, and when we started thinking about this report, I think we're very aware that reports can often be a little bit overwhelming, especially when they have so much information, so much data in them. And one of the missions, I suppose, this year was to ensure that we produce something that wasn't going to overwhelm, but was actually going to provide practical sort of tips, sort of baby steps that organizations can take in order to get to the point that they want to get to. I think a lot of the time, 56% of organizations are technically in the lowest stage of our maturity model, which is what we create to understand, where everybody is at and how we benchmark. There's a very small percentage that are what we call top performers, those that are sort of doing the best this year.
Is it about 11%? 11%?
Yeah,
something
11%.
Like that? Yes.
Yeah. And ultimately, we all want to get to be top performers. That's where we all want to aim to be. And unfortunately, that the steps are massive leaps. They're not baby steps, but actually there is little things that organizations can do, and I think that was our priority this year. And so I would encourage, the first thing I would actually suggest to L&D practitioners to do is that with the report is to actually flip towards the end, where we have included a table of the sort of key insights, and to accompany that we have sort of short-term and achievable tips and sort of longer-term aspirational tips, I suppose. And these short-term tips, actually the data supports that how important these are and how effective they are as well. So as just sort of one example, thinking about culture in particular, culture is a big word, and I think there's an awful lot of ambiguity of what a learning culture should look like and how on earth you get to that. It's a matter of mindset, which we talk a lot about, and that's very difficult to change. And so it's how on earth do you get the amazing culture that we all really want to get. And actually what we found in the data is that lots of behaviours that are definitely having an impact on culture in the end. So behaviours that are very practical, things like giving employees access to tutors or subject experts when they are learning online, making sure that employees have easy access to sort of job aids, helping employees understand where they can find the right information in order to do their job. So these are little things that actually together add up to have a big impact.
My takeaway was the very simple point that you make is the profound difference, almost double an impact between those who develop their managers to be coaches and those who don't. And the high performing organizations do that par excellence. And that is all about, again, the people side, just working with people, not just with technology. So I hope people download this report and read it and learn from it. The crawl on the screen indicates where you can get it. And I'd like to thank Gent and Anna again for a really good conversation about some great research. And long may it continue. And I'll look forward to the reports that you're working on emerging over the next year or so. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nigel. It's been great.
Thank you, Nigel.
Maybe we'll do that later. Hey, so you can see, this is just like using a whiteboard in a classroom. And then you do my 3-year-old's favourite, you just have a nice little wiggle. 1, 2, 3, rate it now.
A really quick question, you might want to answer this later.
You see, I love this.
We've also got Rob Clark with Learning News, all the ups and downs, ins and outs, mergers and acquisitions, all the hot stuff for you from Rob now.
Learning and development is struggling to be heard by its C-suites and struggling to put learning at the heart of their organisations. Just 16% have regular access to senior leaders, and less than half find L&D central to success. Fosway's 2022 Digital Learning Realities research is out. Connect, the event run by the Learning Network, is back this November. Gemma Wells is on Learning News with what's in store. Another learning platform has entered the market. Is Thirst Learning bringing anything new? New research from Fosway and the Learning Technologies show has learning and development struggling to be heard by senior business leaders. Only 45% said that their own C-suite see learning and development as central to the success of their organisation, and that just 1 in 7 get regular access to the C-suite. In 2022, learning and development itself has little confidence in its ability to solve the biggest learning and development issues. Just 1 in 5 think they are effectively supporting reskilling, upskilling, onboarding and business change. But it's a mixed picture, with greater success for learning and development in tackling compliance.
Yeah, I think overall you can look at it as being quite a dark picture, but I think there's some strong positives in there as well. I think that the opportunity is probably in the half of people who said, well, we somewhat believe that we are central to the organization's success. And actually that's sort of half of L&D teams were sort of looking at their C-suite saying, well, sometimes we get invited, sometimes we don't. And the things that they can do is probably think about how they influence that stakeholder group in a more proactive way around some of the things you highlighted, a learning culture, personal development, business transformation, onboarding skills. As you start to zero in on some of those topics, I think you naturally start to work your way up the strategic agenda and almost earn your seat at the table.
Connect, the event run by the Learning Network, is back after a 2-year postponement and is packed full of new ideas and fresh thinking around workplace learning. Just 34% currently think it's easy to progress a career in the learning industry. 91% feel like greater professionalisation is what's needed. And this is the theme for Connect 2022, professionalising learning and development and the changes the learning community might need to make for the benefit of themselves and of their people. And of course, it's a learning network event, so networking is what it's all about.
It came to light that we don't develop ourselves at the depth that we should, perhaps, and we basically don't practice what we preach. So as the ones setting the standards, we want to use Connect to discuss and debate the real challenges and issues to drive change and look at how we ensure we're taking advantage of the best learning opportunities and experiences so that we can transform our value, look at what we need to do differently as a community and to just make this happen.
Another learning platform has entered the market. It claims to offer learners and those managing and facilitating learning a platform different to any other, and one they will actually want to use. Just words, or is Thirst Learning really offering something different?
Quite a lot of the businesses focus on the enterprise side of the market and generally is not a nice fit for the more small and medium enterprise business. First challenge is generally try and find the pricing. You normally can't find the pricing. If you can find the pricing, it's generally a little bit opaque. Then you want to try and book in a demo. That gets a little bit harder as well because you generally have to speak to an SDR and account executive, go through implementation times, etc. And presuming you're happy and you get past all that stage, you're then generally presented with user tiers in terms of if you have 1,050 users, you normally fall into a 3,000 user bracket and you're paying for nearly 2,000 users you don't need. And also you're normally tied into something like a 3 to 5 year contract as well. So we're aiming to change that. We don't have any minimums on our user numbers. You can sign up, get going straight away. You know, if you have 1,050 users, that's what you pay for. If you use more, you pay more. If you use less, you pay less, and we don't tie you into that long-term contract as well. We're one of the handful of the platforms at the moment who are entirely skills-based platforms. So a lot of the platforms that are out there do have an element of skills on them, but it's generally an afterthought in terms of hashtags associated with content. Well, we've been built from the ground up to be skills focused. We are then layering personalization on top of that. So everything you see and do in the platform is personalized to you. So whether that be your dashboard, or if you interrogate a skill, look at a person, or do a search result, for instance, that's going to come back with things that are more relevant for you.
Unleash, the HR and L&D digital media and events business, has won HR Publication of the Year at the WTW Media Awards, which celebrate excellence in journalism. And all the more remarkable achievement, considering the Unleash editorial team started just 18 months ago.
Very surprising, but I'm absolutely delighted and very grateful to be recognised for this, seeing as we're quite a young team. You know, I mean, where I've worked before has always been focused on learning, but this is a much broader canvas at Unleash. So we kind of focus on 4 main areas really, which is future of work, HR tech and transformation, talent and recruitment, and learning and skills. And I guess the things that have been hot this year are that there's kind of topics which are going to endure, things like the skills agenda or talent retention. But even when you talk about talent retention, you get to topics which are a lot more seasonal or kind of the moment for various reasons. The obvious one being the pandemic that we've been through, things like quiet quitting, quiet firing, layoffs, mental health, you know, the employee experience. I think these are topics which have been really, really popular in the last few months.
And that was Learning News over the last couple of weeks. The full interviews with each of the people in today's bulletin are on the website, and there's more on all of the stories that have appeared at the bottom of your screen in the newsfeed. Finally, you may have noticed that we've moved to a brand new studio. It's my new home from where I will bring you the latest news from around the learning industry. I'm Rob Clark. Until next time, thank you very much for your company today.
I'm really pleased to welcome today 2 guests from Cornerstone On Demand. First one is Mike Bollinger. Mike is the Global VP of Strategic Initiatives. And my second guest is Vincent Beliveau, and Vincent is the Chief International Officer. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And what we're going to talk about is a recent publication from Cornerstone On Demand, which is called Thriving in the Global Skills Shortage, Your Path Through the Wilderness. And what I want to know, Vincent, is why did you do it? And why is it important? And why should people download it and read it?
So we speak to executives, business executives, HR executive every day, every week. And the core challenge they surface is that they struggle to upskill, reskill their employee base to be ready for today's job, but most importantly for tomorrow's jobs. And the imperative of developing people's skills is ever more important. We felt we needed a data-driven approach to really understand the problem, and most importantly, give a path, give a solution, highlight key takeaways that really are actionable for organizations today. I think that's why people should read the report.
Yeah, and let's just talk about the main conclusions. The first one is that, and a really interesting conclusion actually, that in your terms of high-performing organizations, and I'm going to ask in a minute Mike to define a high-performing organization, but in your terms, high-performing organizations got their response to COVID right. In other words, almost they thrived during the pandemic, whereas low-performing organizations ran into roadblocks all the way through. They really dramatically underperformed the high-performing ones. And I want to explore that because I think that's a very interesting conclusion from the research. Mike, what's a high-performing organization?
Well, a high-performing organization in this research, we should back up for just a second. In 2020, we did the original version of this report, the Skills Confidence Report, and we found something called the Skills Confidence Gap. In other words, what was unique about the report was it had both an employee and an employer perception. And the confidence between the employer, who felt like they were making an investment, and the employees in terms of consuming the investment, there was a 30-point confidence gap between the two, statistically significant. So in 2022, when we commissioned the follow-on report, in concert with some of the things that Vincent just talked about, we also included an additional dimension known as the high-performing organizations, and we expanded the global reach of this report as well. So again, an employer perspective, an employee perspective, and then a high-performing organization perspective. The high-performing organization was a series of 16 different criteria, including profitability, agility, net promoter score, retention, and many other things. And so we came up with a difference in the skills confidence gap that actually expanded in the 2022 report from 30% to 31%. But what was really interesting about it was that the confidence in both of the cohorts stepped back a little bit, fell back a little bit, probably as a result of some of the efforts in doing the skills development. But that confidence gap of 31%, and the employee's perspective was 55%. In the UK, it was even shorter than that. Only 49% of employees felt confident in their organizations, and in Japan, it fell as low as 36%. But on the other side, 67% in Spain and 57% in Singapore. In other words, there were varying levels of confidence. But what is probably most telling from the high-performing organization perspective was that confidence gap was only 11% in high performers compared to the overall. By the way, the other organizations that on the low side, we call those laggards. And there's some very significant findings in the difference between high performers and laggards.
Clearly, yes. And that's actually quite dramatic and it's significant. And part of high performance is investment in learning and development, creating opportunities for staff to maintain their own skill base, increase their competence, and generally have faith that their organization cares about them and wants them to continue to perform. So what else, Vincent? We talked about the skills gap and the laggards and the high performers. What else did you discover in this report?
So there's the differences between geographies that were quite fascinating for me operating internationally. Mike outlined some of them. And then the delta between high-performing organizations and kind of the laggards. And then the differences in how they operate as an organization and what they put in place to empower their employees to really take control of their career, their development, and their skills. And it's these action items, putting in place the right infrastructure, the right culture, demonstrating executive involvement around skill development, and that the company really cares for the employee. That perception and that action, both of them matter, really are what became quite obvious from the report, and it matches what I see in the market talking to many organizations.
In other words, a committed employee overcomes the kinds of challenges that COVID threw at the organizations. An employee who is less committed, has less faith in the employer, tends not to put the same kind of effort in, or just gives up at that point. So these things are really material, aren't they? These aren't kind of, what a luxury, what a nice thing to be able to do when times are good. This is almost like we have to do this, particularly when times are bad, if we want to thrive. So Mike, what struck you as well when you were looking at the early data coming through and going, wow, that was something that surprised me. What surprised you?
So, and you called it out just a minute ago, Nigel, is the fact that we know skills can expire fast. And we know that in some cases, technical skills are have a lifespan of just 2.5 years. So the half-life is very, very short on skills. So as people, we feel that. So one of the things that we asked about, obviously we looked at the high-performing organizations and their level of investment in skills development initiatives. And what we found was, compared to the laggards, that 72% of high-performing organizations have already started or are starting within the first year, compared to just 15% of the laggards in terms of investing in this. So that led us to ask, and this was the interesting part, how does it spill over into the solutions themselves from the employee perspective? Again, remember, we've got two perspectives here. So we asked the employees, how do you feel about the solutions that are being invested in? How do you feel about them in terms of being put into place? And again, the alignment that you called out between the employee and the employer. Overall, in high-performing organizations, 91% of employees were very positive about those solutions, compared to 10% of laggards. Now, from a global perspective, the UK and Germany in particular were high as well, in terms of 100% of the employees felt very good about the solutions in Germany, and 92% from the employers or employees at high-performing organizations in the UK, whereas the laggards were that same delta, that 90% delta existed there as well. So that takeaway to me was not just that investment was being made, but how aligned the employees were in terms of feeling invested in from the high performers versus the laggards.
Yeah, and the knock-on effect of just being comfortable, motivated, and engaged. Let's get back to you, Vincent. What's also struck me as very, very interesting is if you look at the list of potential training and development areas, starting the highest on the list is customer service, the lowest down there is productivity. But what struck me when you go through that is there's a pretty close alignment between what the employee thinks is important and what the employer thinks is important.
100%. The leading organizations invest in developing the skills of their people, period. There's no doubt there. And why? Because the obsolescence of skills is ever short, it becomes ever faster, meaning that the length of the duration of life of a skill becomes ever faster, becomes ever shorter. And how often jobs change and rotate and new jobs get created accelerates. And therefore the need for skills development is super high, whatever job you perform today. And whilst maybe a few years back, there was a bit of a debate whether the employee felt the need to learn so fast versus the employer, today everyone agrees. Everyone's in alignment. There is a need to learn very fast. And what we see is in the high-performing organizations, both employees and employers agree that the company has put a priority on that. But in laggards, the employees perceive the company has not put a priority there. And we encourage every organization around the world today to accelerate their motions on this front and truly demonstrate to their employees that they are investing in developing their skills, because that's the demand from both the employers and the employees.
And an additional follow-on to that, Nigel, The report also explored where people go. So at Cornerstone, we believe very firmly that skills development and learning goes hand in hand with career mobility. And we also asked in this report employees, where do you go look first? What is it that you're looking for when it comes to career mobility and skills development? And the clear takeaway was, I'm looking to my employer first. I'm looking for mentorship and skills development platform and content and a number of different things. And the one key takeaway here is that high-performing organizations with skills development and career mobility, they tend to have broad initiatives and not just one single approach. And that came through as an absolute best practice for high-performing organizations.
Any final words, Vincent, final word on the report, and any conclusions or points that we haven't managed to make up until this point?
No, I would just say we haven't done the report in 2 years yet. But I think it will show the imperative in investing in skill development will have widened or become even higher, if you will, than it was a few years back. I only see that this trend accelerating. Therefore, I would encourage everyone to accelerate their plans on this front. And obviously, we're very eager to engage with everyone out there around this topic and help them.
Mike.
You know, you called it out in those 5 steps, but what I really took away was that 82% of employees at high-performing organizations felt like the company had insights into their gaps and were making that investment. So I agree with Vincent. This is just accelerating, and at the high-performing companies at an even faster pace.
This is very important, isn't it? This is a kind of sea change, I think, in the potential for investing in employees and some real evidence of material returns in that investment. So both Mike and Vincent, thank you so much for talking to me today and introducing a really interesting report. So you can see on the screen where to download it from. Please do that. Please read it and enjoy it and absorb its message. So Vincent, Mike, thank you so much for coming and joining me today.
Thank you.
Well, another month is over, and I found the interviews and the content really fascinating. Kate, what really caught your eye this month?
Well, I think for me, I've sort of been working a little bit with Cornerstone in the background on sharing the results of their research, but I really like the approach that they've taken with not just sort of saying, yeah, skills are important. I think we all know that by now. I think it is genuinely looking at what high-performing organisations are doing and how you can take some of that learning, even if you're a smaller organisation or you're not-for-profit or a public sector. There are kind of traits and merits there that I think everybody can apply, which I think is really useful. And what did you make about the Mind Tools research? It's interesting to look at them in parallel.
It is actually, yes. I thought this was one of the best ever Mind Tools reports, not because it was more comprehensive, it's still got the same numbers of people contributing, but the conclusions are starting to get very, very interesting. The link between learning and performance, between learning and high-performing cultures, and the link between learning and general engagement of the workforce. They're beginning to nail that. We kind of know that instinctively, but we need organizations like Mind Tools to give us the data and to pin it down and to nail it, so you can hold that up when you go into the C-suite and say, look, here is the evidence. So both those reports are evidence-based, have relatively large numbers of contributors. I think that the Cornerstone is more global than Mind Tools. It's largely UK and a kind of large number of US, but not many others, whereas Cornerstone have reached to the 4 corners, as they say. So next month, see you there. Enjoy the show.
Yeah, so we've got some events. So she said with a rather big event just coming up herself. So I can say this one without looking. Unleash World happening in Paris on the 12th and 13th of October. Can't wait to bring you all the latest from that. Some friends of the show like Gemma Patterson, Danny Seals, some faces that we know well, Josh Novell, for example, talking interestingly not just about learning. So branching out into experience and other areas there. So really excited to bring you all the latest from that. 13th of October is also the Learning Technologies Autumn Forum. So I can't make it to that one, but I believe you're going, Nigel. So
I'm going, I'm speaking. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so we've got both of those first hand for next month. 26th to the 28th of October is Dublin with our friends at the e-Learning Guild in America. 6th to the 9th of November is Orlando, so Learning 2022. 9th to the 10th of November is CIPD ACE, Annual Conference and Exhibition in Manchester. There's lots of these. 23rd to the 25th is Online Educa, happening over in Berlin, as always. And then right the way through, past Christmas and out the other side, 16th of February is the Learning Awards as well. So if you've got your entries into that or for that. But yeah, lots going on. It really does feel like we're back after
It does. I hope you're taking notes while Kate was talking. I kind of lost count of how many events. We really are back with a bang, I think. So 27th of October, see you there.
See you soon.